Self-isolation and social distancing. By default, these things have been my life for years. I heard a woman complaining of not being hugged in a month. Try not being touched for years. Suddenly the cool kids had no life and I was the one out and about. I was working in a homeless shelter, engaged in the busy weeks of cleaning leading up to Callahan inspections. One week we were laughing about how we were not supposed to be touching our faces, and the next week inspections and the entire U.S. economy were being canceled. The news gave the impression that the whole country was in quarantine, but worker bees like me were eventually designated essential, as if COVID-19 would just pass over us like God over the firstborn of Israel. It was absurd. By chance, Laurie Anderson was part of a project which put slogans all over Times Square. Her slogan was, "Embrace the absurd." That became my coping mechanism. Record the absurd. Everything I shot in this video, every song I recorded in this video for the Page Collective, it was part of a conversation with the absurd. It was absurd that out of all the pandemic movies ever made, no writer ever anticipated that stores would run out of pocket change. And I was a part of the problem. I had the biggest pile of unspent change in my house that I've ever owned. It was absurd that I was given a letter that I was supposed to show to the cops to prove that I was an essential worker coming home from my late shift. Papers, please. It was absurd that for the first time in the 116-year history of the subway, they were shutting down the trains at night. It was absurd that I got trapped in Manhattan twice. It was absurd that the city that never sleeps was going to bed at night, just like any other city in the world. It was absurd that when I went out on the empty subway tracks with a camera and did absurd things, there was no one to stop me. Through the fractured skies to where the answer really lies. I can see through the broken clockworks. I can see through the gathering dark. A beat exploding from the heat of the stars drives all the atoms to go dancing apart. And icy cold planets like a nun with a ruler slow down the dancing before it can start. And the balance of the earth is a choreography of runaway entropy, DNA twisting into an order of chaos complexity. Fractals and flowers, flamingos and embryos, and a kid sleeping on a park bench run away to New York. Marvel at the virus, Lord of the absurd, Emperor of entropy. The bones of the ancient in the earth did reside, till the moon moody tide had unburied the bride. Life-giving had taken both mother and child, down the deep winding wild, down the deep winding wild. And there's a king on a throne, grinning at a victory where the pages of history have left no remark. And the last photographs of a dead family dynasty are rotting in a landfill under a park. And some shabby preacher from a dirt-watered town is rousing the rabble in a book called Mark. And some French peasant girl is burning in a bonfire that nobody watching but ever called a spark. And a boy on a bench with a packet of poetry has big plans for New York. pinpoint of balance in the universe, and life is the balance of a balance dancing on the point of a pin. A boy wakes up on a park bench, wakes up in the morning and gets lost into the crowds of New York.
After the lockdown, Portland, Oregon stole the show by having a complete nervous breakdown, which itself was upstaged after the entire West Coast caught fire. It was that kind of year. But during the lockdown, the undisputed hotspot was New York City. No other city saw so many dying so fast. In terms of embracing the absurd as a coping mechanism, nothing encapsulated the moment more for me than when I saw a man riding up the middle of abandoned Park Avenue shouting, "We're number one! We're number one!"
The quarantine was spooky and sad, but there is a sweetness too. Before the lockdown, there was so much anger. Now I could go out every 7 p.m. and listen to clapping and banging pots and pans out of windows for essential workers like me. Dogs were howling and barking along. This was the best month of their lives. Everyone home, all of it echoing across a once noisy city. Turns out the anger was being stored up, caged. You can't keep the human beast locked up too long. Historically, riots and uprisings follow lockdowns. People always find a reason. In June, the beast of anger got out terrifyingly fast, like everything else this year. Packed around your feet, dressed in pretty lights and warm smiles. You never thought you'd be gone in a week. Breezy out here with me on the street. Oh, what a scene's for. What a scene's for. What a scene's for. Jude is sorting out the shards of an Egyptian jar. He says you survived the pharaohs and the Roman Empire, the Byzantine, the British and the Turk. But it was never gonna work. They put you up on a high shelf. Never thought a house cat would go and knock you all to hell. Oh, and what a saint's for. What a saint's for. What a saint's for. Such a fight.
take a long way down. Paul Bearer of St. Jude is crying at the traffic light. For all the ones who never got it wrong, and at the same time they never got it right. Drive on down to where all the gray branches are taking root up into the clouds. As the sleeping starlings go shout it out loud. Wake them, make them, take it back up to God. What a saint's for. 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 For all the ones who never got it wrong, and at the same time they never got it right. Drive on down to where all the gray branches take root up into the clouds. As the sleeping starlings shout it out loud. Wake them, make them, take it up to God. What a saint's for. What a saint's for.
What a city is about is essentially noise. In that period between March and May, there were all kinds of different silences. Before COVID, there was always at work these bricks and bricks and bricks of face masks, but they never got used. And so we would be moving things over and over again, and we would have to unstack these things and then stack them in a different location. As soon as the crisis began, people in a good position to do so would be smuggling face masks out of the facility in black bags so that the cameras couldn't see. And when I saw this, I started hiding face masks. And ironically, the hidden ones were the decoys for the ones that I'd hidden in plain sight. By May, all of the cases had been found except for one. Right there, when you walked into the storeroom and turned to the left, there was a big box that nobody had found. But the face mask thing I thought was just sort of this perfect symbol, because one of my habits is when I'm thinking, I'll sometimes start moving my lips, thinking out loud, and so the face mask caused me to kind of keep my mouth shut. And it kind of kept everybody's mouth shut. It quieted people who were already quieted. I remember especially men. Sports were all canceled. And it's a lot of the connection that men feel with each other. And without sports, they were just sort of these sullen figures, kind of walking around, with scraggly beards and scraggly hair because they couldn't go to the barber. And there was something that happened with fireworks. It's normal for a week ahead of July the 4th to start to hear fireworks, pop, pop. You don't hear a lot of them, and then July the 4th happens and you hear a little bit afterward, and that's it. But this year it started with the chaos and the riots early in June, then it went through July, even into August. And you would just wake up in the middle of the night and there would be these, not just firecrackers, huge explosions. And you'd realize, okay, this is the new order of things, It was kind of this act of defiance, and it was weird that these explosions only created a sense of silence because there was nothing else. No traffic. You could wake up in the morning and hear the sound of a dove. There was this sensation of just being in the kind of the opening of a zombie apocalypse movie, with just these sort of little creepy things going on, and you just wondered, where they were going to go. During the protests, the quiet of quarantine had segued neatly into the silence of curfew. The City Hall subway stop was blockaded, so I went down to Canal Street Station. Down on the platform, I was waiting.
And during that time, the only thing I could hear was these three boys above me, and through a grate, a fight was going to go down. And then I thought, well, so, I'm going to make this sound, and maybe I'll kind of throw them off. And so I made this, like, ghost-like sound, like... And, of course, in a normally noisy city, you wouldn't hear a goddamn thing from under the grate. But I don't know what happened, because seconds later, I heard a whoop, whoop, whoop. And one of them shouted, 5-0, 5-0, 5-0, and they just scattered.
After 9/11, everyone knew what a falling skyscraper looked like, and the movies were filled with them. Now they know what a pandemic looks like. Now I know what expression people wear when they are a step or two from surrendering civilization to panic. I knew what it was like when the only thing you could hear on the street was the sound of a howling lunatic, and sometimes that lunatic was me. By the time I got to 125th Street, last stop in Manhattan, the trains were closed. I had to get out and find a bus. The sleeping bodies of the homeless ejected from the train were strewn everywhere. The women in the shelter where I worked in Manhattan were moved to empty hotels, and my job was moved to Brooklyn. When they called Florida early on election night, my reaction was sinking resignation. When Fox News, of all places, called Arizona, I knew I could sleep. The writing was on the wall. Wednesday morning, I woke up and knew it was over. Thinking of one particular concerned citizen, at 7:42, I sent her this text. If this were any other year, they'd have looked at the fact that all of the outstanding votes were from deep blue districts and called it a night. Instead, the media dragged it out for 5 days. When block parties broke out on New York streets after the Sunday announcement of Biden's win, I wasn't there with a video camera because for me, the election was over on Wednesday. I had no idea, parties were going to break out. On that Wednesday the 4th, I shot the following video at work, my last entry in the COVID Diaries. Windows were boarded up on Election Day. It was that kind of a year. COVID killed a presidency that needed to die. First one-termer in 28 years. It's kind of like the end of that movie Alien, where all you can do is save the cat. It was a good cat.
It's all over now. It's just easier to accept it. It's all over now. It's just easier to accept it. It's all over now. It's just easier to accept it. It's all over now. It's just easier to accept it. It's all over now. It's just something in the light has changed. In the cold apartment where she once stayed, and I can't remember where else or when. It last made sense how it did then.
The train will take the uptown Louisville track to